Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Squawka Talker Podcast. And the focus today is all on the Champions League. Europe's biggest, brightest and shiniest competition dropped its group stage draw overnight. And here on the Squawka Talker, we will be previewing all 8 groups as Thomas Tuchel and Chelsea look to defend their title in 2022. And with most of us finally taking that chance to catch up with some old friends in the last few weeks, our own pals over at UEFA have kindly followed suit, as the theme, or the apparent theme, of the group stages is old friends and enemies. Group A, that spots Manchester City up against PSG on the back of their semi-final showdown last season. Liverpool, they're paired with old foes Atletico Madrid, and Manchester United are up against Europa League conquerors Villarreal. All 3 Premier League groups, that's where we get ourselves started, alongside Chelsea, who are in Group H with Serie A giants Juventus. And then in part 2, we'll be scanning across the rest of the draw. Barcelona, they find themselves paired up with Bayern Munich as they look to exercise their 8-2 ghosts, and Real Madrid take on Inter Milan. Right then, plenty to get through on the show. My name's Feargal Brennan, and as ever, the man for the big occasion, we have Squawka's very own Mohammed Butt. Mo, how's things?
Yeah, pretty excited, mate. The draw was very spicy, and the transfer news since the draw happened has been even spicier. So, it's just a big old bowl of cumin right in front of my face. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, and if you like spicy and you like hot takes, make sure you keep listening because Mo is bound to have an absolute stack of them. And it seems fitting that we've got ourselves a glamorous signing for the start of the Champions League. With Jake already off on international duty, we have Bundesliga expert and writer for The Independent, Stefan Bienkowski. Stefan, how's things?
I'm doing very well, guys. Thanks for introducing me to the podcast, and I couldn't agree more. I think the Champions League draw just really makes it feel like we're in the thick of it now. And I can't wait for it.
Yeah, Group A, we're going to get ourselves started on. And this is, Mo, in terms of Hollywood setups, PSG up against Manchester City. It doesn't get much better than this. UEFA draws can be a bit dry sometimes in terms of having to wait 3 or 4 hours till a team actually gets pulled out. This is what you're looking for. 2 massive heavyweights that we don't have to wait until the knockout stages, that have to test against each other in the group stages. And there's a very recent bit of history, obviously, with City and PSG, going back to last year's semi-final. City winning, going on to lose against Chelsea in the final. But I want to look at PSG for a second, because their entire model, including bringing Lionel Messi in this summer, is built around winning the Champions League. But when you look at their record in the last decade or so, it's not great. 4 last 16 exits, 3 quarterfinals, and then the last 2 years they've stepped it up. Lost against Bayern in the final in 2020, and then obviously in the semis against City this season. Given the fact that they have brought in Messi, they've brought in Donnarumma, Ramos, etc., they are now building a team rather than this just very expensively assembled array of trinkets that try and play incredible football and score lots of goals. They now look to have a real structure and a spine right the way through the team. Is this the season where perceptions of PSG in the Champions League do start to change?
I mean, yes. I guess it's the thing. The proof is in the pudding, right? And as they've assembled the most fearsome collection of people known to man via free transfers that apparently have no impact on their wage budget, whatever. Financial fair play is great, guys. It's a fantastic side. Donnarumma is an upgrade on Keylor Navas, right? Fantastic, a massive goalkeeper, player of the tournament, the Euros, I'm pretty sure. Dominate the final, man of the match, the final. Amazing goalkeeper, right? Hakimi is outrageous. Is a supernova of a fullback, as we've seen at Dortmund and Inter now. Gini Wijnaldum. I almost feel sorry for him in a way, because I'm sure when he first went there, he was thinking, I'm going to be able to play like Netherlands Gini, get forward, score goals, that sort of thing. And then they bring in Messi, and it's like, oh no, I'm just defending again. And so but he's great at defending. We saw for Liverpool for years, the big complaint about him was, all he does is he tackles, wins the ball back, and keeps the ball moving, right? But that's what PSG need in midfield. They need someone that's going to be fit all the time, which he is, that's going to keep running after the ball, win it back, and then recycle it intelligently. He does that perfectly. And then Messi's the greatest player in the world. I mean, what more do you want? He's a one-man attack. He immediately makes up for the fact that PSG didn't have any attacking midfielders. He starts attacks from attacking midfield. The fact that they've got Neymar as well means that Messi starts attacks in midfield, as he always does, and Neymar is in the final third to make things happen. We've seen this combination before with MSN. It was devastating. Of course, what made that work was the selfless and hard work of Luis Suarez, right? And what they have now, what they have right now is Kylian Mbappe, who's a very different kind of forward altogether. And it almost tips it over into imbalance, where they become too top heavy, because Mbappe doesn't really defend much. Neymar doesn't defend much, if at all. And Messi doesn't defend at all, because he's 34 years old. You don't want him running around pressing. And what's interesting with this whole rumor that Mbappe might be leaving is, for their Champions League hopes, I think that actually helps them. It will make winning Ligue 1 harder, right? Because Mbappe is just a goal machine, and you want goal machines to plow through Ligue 1, right? Especially because Neymar's only ever fit half the time. So winning Ligue 1 will become trickier, but winning the Champions League, I think, becomes easier. Because before, you had three whole players who don't do any pressing. That's very hard to carry in the knockout stages of the Champions League, right? Like, we saw Barca struggle with two players who couldn't press, right? Messi and Suarez, right? And it led to them getting absolutely slapped by everybody away from home. PSG ran three of them, but if they lose Mbappe and they replace him with someone that does a lot of work, a lot of pressing, I don't know. I saw a rumor about Richarlison, someone like that, someone that does loads of energetic running and loads of pressing. That might really help them in the latter stages. Honestly, as absurd as it sounds, because suddenly they'll have more of a defensive framework to just let Messi and Neymar do their thing. And as we've seen with Messi repeatedly, if he has a partner running on his level, it's basically impossible to stop him, because you can cover him, but then he'll find his partner. The problem with Barcelona last few years is he was finding washed up Suarez, can't score away from home in the Champions League, Jordi Alba. Like, there's not, he's not passing. It's been a one-man band. You put him with Neymar, that's completely different. Neymar's got the most obscene numbers in the Champions League since he went to PSG. Messi also right up there. These two, chances created, goals scored, chances, assists, big chances created. They're phenomenal. And it's going to be, basically, I almost think if Mbappe leaves, it'll be a hit to their reputation, but it'll make it a lot easier for them to do, as you say, and change their whole image in the Champions League.
Looking across to the rest of Group A, obviously City and PSG, Stefan, are the two big standout names. They're the two sides we are expecting to go through as the top two in Group A. But RB Leipzig, it's an interesting proposition with Leipzig in terms of how they're expected to do. New man in the hot seat, Jesse March, has come in at the start of the campaign. Two big, obviously, departures, Konate to Liverpool and Upamecano to Bayern Munich. A little bit of a step up in terms of finish last season, back-to-back third places, and then grabbing second place in behind Bayern at just kind of in the final few weeks of last season. Given the fact that Jesse March has come in, a little bit of a change in mentality, change in structure, and two big exits. Yes, there has been incomings. Silva and Angelino have made their loan moves permanent, but they don't look as strong. Last season was very, very good. If Bayern slip, they look the best place to maybe kind of leapfrog them. But as it stands, they definitely don't look as strong as last season.
Yeah, I think that's probably up for contention, to be honest with you. I think in terms of the actual squad, I think they're okay. As you said, obviously they lost Konate and Upamecano, but in kind of typical Leipzig fashion, they've managed to bring in two really exciting young defenders in Gvardiol and Samakin, who came from Croatia and France, respectively. They've gone straight into the team, and they look okay, to be honest with you. Andre Silva is undoubtedly kind of the real kind of the big signing. That's the kind of player who maybe 3 or 4 years ago would have probably left the Bundesliga entirely, unless maybe Dortmund could have done some sort of deal, or indeed if he went straight to Bayern Munich. So, you talk about a player there who scored more goals than Haaland last year. I think the players are there to really properly challenge in the Bundesliga, and I think they're probably there to maybe, they could give Man City and PSG a bloody nose. I think this probably kind of suits Marsh, to be honest, this group, because if they were maybe put in a group like Dortmund were, perhaps where they're expected to really qualify, I think that would have been a lot of pressure on Marsh, who already has a huge amount of pressure domestically to show that he can live up to Nagelsmann. But in this group, very few people in Germany or obviously abroad will be expecting him to take one of the top two spots off PSG or Man City. So they really can go into those games against those behemoths and just kind of test their tactics, show what they can do. I do think they are capable of, causing problems. But this is obviously a transition period for RB Leipzig this season. So, yeah, I think more or less, I think they're probably more than happy with the fact that they've got a group that won't put a huge amount of pressure on them. The Bundesliga itself is undoubtedly the priority for them this season. Maybe winning the German Cup as well, for example. So I think on the whole they'll be quite happy with this, and they'll be quite happy with the strength of their squad. But now it comes down to whether Marsh can, put it all together and improve on what Nagelsmann put together for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, Nagelsmann really built a hell of a side there. I mean, they knocked out Man United last year, but they'll have a much harder prospect, must have a time of things, I should say, with Man City, I reckon. I mean, not just because Nagelsmann's left, but because City are just better than Man United were last year. They're better coached. They came really close to winning it. Last 2 years, semi-final, final defeat. It was brutal, right? But one thing about the Champions League final was painfully obvious was they were becoming predictable. Chelsea knew exactly what they were going to do almost every single time they had the ball, apart from a couple of runs from Sterling, which didn't end in anything because he used the ball terribly. But that was it, really. They were so predictable. What Grealish adds is a level of massive unpredictability. You can never count on where he's going to go. He can go inside and outside. He's a fantastic dribbler. He wins free kicks brilliantly. Now, in the Premier League, with the new tough tackling rules, probably not going to work. But in Europe, they've always come down hard on tackles. He's going to win a fair few fouls and free kicks and penalties. It's not too much of a stretch to say that the winner could probably come from this group. The PSG, and that could be the final, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. In terms of an early tip, that's a pretty strong one from Mo. PSG and City look likely to stroll this, but Leipzig won't make it easy for them. Skipping across to Group B, another matchup, Mo. We'll throw this one back to you. Liverpool and Atletico Madrid, a rematch of that final game before COVID at Anfield, where Atletico put the then holders out. We all remember Morata getting them goals and Simeone celebrating and screaming in front of the Anfield Road end. But Liverpool's entire focus this season has been getting back on track. They've obviously brought in Konate that we mentioned from Leipzig to beef up their defensive numbers, but the big stories from them this summer is Van Dijk back fit. Obviously, they've lost Wijnaldum, but Jordan Henderson looks back fit. Mane, Salah have both stayed at the club. That's Klopp's pretty much entire modus operandi. Solidity, getting things back on track and getting them moving forward. We're going to talk about Atletico in just a second, but I want to ask you about Liverpool, Mo. In terms of that as a policy, given the strength and depth that they now have with Konate and these players coming back from injury, are they equipped enough to fight across all of these fronts?
I say yes, but not because of their renewals, right? Because the thing is, what they did, Liverpool, was really bad, was they stagnated. They didn't make big enough changes, or rather the changes they tried to make didn't really come off. After the title win and after the Champions League win, they kind of stood still. They didn't do anything into that front three until Diogo Jota, and that's the game changer. And this is why I'm saying I'm actually quite hopeful for Liverpool. Konate adds depth at the back, and that's great. Konate, Matip. It's funny because they went from last season when they had no centre-backs. This season, they've probably got the strongest centre-back depth in the Premier League, maybe even in Europe. Van Dijk, Matip, Gomez, and Konate is phenomenal. There's no bad defenders there, not even average defenders. They're all brilliant. Of course, 3 of them are injury-prone, and one of them's coming off a cruciate injury. So, I mean, let's see. But they're all very good. In midfield, they're going to really miss Wijnaldum, but they added potentially Harvey Elliott, this kid, right? If you watched him, he's nowhere near defensive. It's defensively solid, but what he adds in attack is very interesting. He flanked wide a lot against Burnley. I don't know if he'll do in the Champions League, but he flanked wide against Burnley. Salah basically came in and played striker, and Trent played midfield. And it was essentially a very sort of interesting on the ball sort of movement from Liverpool, because it meant Trent was in the most dangerous area for him, which is where he can play passes. Salah could basically roam around free, which is always bad news to the opponent. And then Elliott was playing right wing, so that's interesting. But the game changer is Jota, because Jota scores goals. Because Roberto Firmino does not score goals, as we saw at Anfield against Atletico Madrid that night. Sadio Mane can struggle sometimes. He can be lethal. He can also struggle. It's a very strange thing with Sadio Mane. Salah is world class. Salah will always score you goals. We know this, right? This is for sure. But if it's just one guy doing it, it's easy to shut the team down. Diogo Jota is different class. He's adapted to the team the same way Mane adapted to the team. He's a very, very good player who's elevated himself to near world class status by being such a perfect fit for Klopp's system. He presses phenomenally. He makes incredible, intelligent runs. He's a great finisher with either foot or with his head. So he's really dangerous. And I think that's going to give Liverpool such a huge edge. Not just against Atletico Madrid, but it will against Atletico Madrid, because Atletico will be, set up to block off movement from out wide, and the quick interplays, exchanges of passes and long shots. They're not going to be able, they might be able to, you never know, but the quick little movements that Jota makes in the box, that could catch them out. But Simeone plays a back three now, so they could go man for man up front at the back. I don't know. It's very strange. We'll see what happens exactly. It's going to be a very interesting matchup. But Liverpool, to me, with the addition of Jota and everyone being fit now, that's a very interesting prospect. If they can get everyone motivated the same way they had them last time they won the Champions League, watch out. Everyone's been ignoring them because they haven't done any big transfer business, but the core of that very good team is still there. Admittedly, one or two injuries really stabilizes them, as last season showed. But if everyone stays relatively healthy, watch out for Liverpool, man. That's a team right there.
Stefan, just looking at Atletico for a second, obviously, throw back to that game at Anfield where they knocked out Liverpool, ended their chances of defending the title. And Mo is right in terms of tactics and structure, the way that they set up. Simeone has tweaked and changed some very, very minor things, but you would still expect, as a broad stroke, them to set up in a similar way, close down space, block off runs, etc. Obviously, they've lost Thomas Partey, but Marcus Llorente's really come to the fore. Obviously, Luis Suarez, if they can squeeze the lemon and get another season of goals out of him. But some of the interesting signings that have come into Atletico this summer. Barcelona, obviously, the civil war of Lionel Messi leaving and the fact they allegedly don't have any money. Real Madrid have pretended they don't have any money, despite the fact that they're trying to bring in Kylian Mbappe. Atletico have not told any lies. They've not said that they don't have any money, but they've said, we've got a bit. So they brought in Rodrigo de Paul and Matthias Cunha from Hertha Berlin. Cunha is an interesting one because outside of the Bundesliga, not a lot of fans know an enormous amount about him. Given the fact that he's going to come into this Atletico team, he's going to add another level to them, another dimension to them in attack. Do you think that he and De Paul can bring them back to the table as challengers to go on and win this?
I think it's a really interesting question. I think the players that they have signed probably illustrates where Simeone thinks there are problems in this team. I must admit, I'm not a huge Cunha fan, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. I think he does well in bursts, and he certainly showed over small stretches of games he's got a lot of talent. But he just didn't do it consistently enough at Hertha. And, that could just be because Hertha had been a bit of a circus club for a while, the squad being back and forth, managers coming and going. So, under a real disciplinarian like Simeone, he might kind of straighten things out and really put on a good run of form. And maybe that's what Atletico are hoping for. Similarly with De Paul, he's a kind of goal-scoring, playmaking midfielder. He can also offer a degree of inspiration and kind of creativity midfielder. And I think that's kind of what Atletico might probably need going forward this season, because I must admit, I'll be really intrigued to see how Luis Suarez does this season. I thought he kicked, he started off with a flyer last season, but then I think towards the second half of the season, he started to slow down, played a full Copa America campaign. And then you add to that how Felix, who hasn't really been probably as good as he perhaps should have done, or perhaps the promise that he once showed. And you kind of see a kind of quite a sparse kind of attacking line there, in my opinion. So I think a lot hangs on how well Cunha does. I think a lot hangs on how well De Paul does. And I think a lot hangs on the kind of fitness of, someone like Luis Suarez. Does he still have the same inspiration now that he's already proved, or he's already kind of, stuck it up to Barcelona by winning the title last season? Does he still have that fire in his belly? So I think, as you say, broad strokes, Atletico still look very strong defensively, and midfield to be very agricultural, shall we say. But I think in attack, there's probably one or two too many question marks that have to be answered before we can really suggest that there'll be a huge problem for Liverpool.
Yeah, see, that's the interesting thing you mentioned there, is the fire and motivation of Luis Suarez, because basically last season was pure revenge, right? He was just infuriated. How dare you think I'm so rubbish? Sell me to a rival goal and then I'll show you. It's happened to Barca before as well. It happened with Michael Laudrup, in the mid-90s. It happened to Real Madrid with Samuel Eto'o. They sold him to Barcelona. He went back to Dortmund then. It happened to Barcelona with David Villa, to Atletico Madrid, the very same club, in 2013-14. So this is something Barca should be familiar with, and Atletico Madrid have benefited from here. But yeah, you're right. Once the rage sort of wore off, and he had I don't know how many goals it was halfway through La Liga, 12, 13 goals. Once the rage wore off and the fit and the reality of, I'm really old and I can't run around much, started to set in, his goal scoring dropped off dramatically. Picked up a little bit towards the end of the season, but essentially, the thing is, all he does is he moves inside the box and scores goals. But that's what Atletico Madrid asked him to do, which is why it worked. The question is, like you said, that fire and hunger, is that there? But what you didn't mention, what's interesting is Angel Correa is sort of emerging as the big savior for them. He was fantastic at the end of last season, firing them to the title, really scoring more goals than Suarez did in that run-in. He scored 3 goals so far in 2 games in La Liga. he's being the guy stepping up, and he's a phenomenal talent. And he was when they signed him as a teenager, but like he never really developed. And if he has suddenly found his potential or starting to realize his potential, that's actually a huge player Atletico have. And then DePaul is phenomenal. DePaul was amazing in the Copa America, one of the best players in the final, amazing assist to Di Maria for the winning goal. He's sensational. He's a really high-pressing midfielder, but he's got what the other Atletico midfielders either don't have or have forgotten about, is a pass, a killer pass. And he can dribble. And this is the thing, Atletico Madrid, they're playing 3-5-2, right? Their midfield three now is Koke at the base, and then Lemar and DePaul, which is actually very attacking from Cholo Simeone. Now, of course, you have three centre-backs and Koke holding, and the wide players work very hard defensively, right? They're wing-backs. But at the same time, having those three in those key positions means that they can burst from midfield with real creativity and ingenuity. Now, against Liverpool, it's going to be interesting to see how they try and exploit the spaces behind and around Fabinho, if their spaces are there to be exploited, because that's where Liverpool can be beaten, is the space behind their midfield, because their midfield is relentless pressing. But if you sucker their midfield out, DePaul can beat them on the dribble, Lemar makes runs in behind. So I really like Atletico's team, but I have to say Stefan has a point that it's just the attack. But I'm telling you, though, watch out for Angel Correa. He could be this year's Marcos Llorente. Like at Anfield, Marcos Llorente did the damage, 2 goals, devastated Liverpool. This year it could be Angel Correa. Just keep an eye on him and keep an eye on DePaul, because that boy is about to take off in a big bad way.
The other two teams in Group B, Stefan, AC Milan and Porto. Porto have found themselves on the wrong end of a couple of fairly big beatings from Liverpool in the last couple of years. But AC Milan are an interesting prospect, not too dissimilar to Leipzig's situation at the back end of last season, where they were in the title race with Inter, but in the last 6 weeks, or maybe even going back to 2 months, 3 months, they just dropped off the pace massively. It's been an interesting summer from them in terms of transfers. Fikayo Tomori's made his loan move permanent. They brought in Mike Maignan as a keeper, but they've lost 2 massive players. Donnarumma, who's moved on to go to PSG, and Hakan Çalhanoğlu, who's also left on a free transfer. Given the fact that they've lost those big players, they've brought in some replacements, but crucially last season when it really mattered, Pioli and his players just kind of fell a bit short. They find themselves in a really difficult group. Atletico Madrid defending La Liga champions. Liverpool, we would expect them to be right in the middle of the Premier League title race this season. This is going to be really, really tough for Milan to get out of.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I think they're probably, in many ways, the real kind of question mark of this team. They could be fantastic. They could end up being quite terrible, as you kind of said. Like, domestically, they've shown that they can go the distance to a certain extent, but then they can also kind of stumble over themselves. And this squad, you just kind of look through the squad, and it's just kind of full of players that can win games or could end up causing them problems. I think a lot of people will look at Giroud, they'll look at Ibrahimovic, and they probably won't look much further, and they'll think, oh, typical Milan, the squad full of aging stars, wrapped around players who maybe aren't as good as they used to be. But there are a lot of good players in this team. I think particularly which might get them quite far is that kind of centre-back pairing of Tomori and Kjaer, who I think are both tremendous central defenders. They should hopefully be able to make up for, obviously, the goalkeeper moving on. But as you say, and I think they actually do have quite a lot of young players kind of littered throughout this team. So there is a good squad there beyond maybe, 2 old lumps up front. But again, we just have to wait and see. We haven't seen Milan in Champions League for so long that we can't even really can't even judge a lot of these players based on how they did in previous seasons. So we really will just have to wait and see how they do.
The key for Milan is going to be keeping Ismail Bennacer fit. He's the creative hub of that team. He's phenomenal in midfield. Obviously, Zlatan, Giroud, all that stuff. But if they can keep Bennacer fit, that's going to make the difference.
Before we move on to United and Group H, we were kind of universal with City and PSG in Group A of who would get through to the last 16. Very, very quickly, Stefan, we'll go to you first. Who's getting out of Group B? Who's the top 2?
I can't look beyond Liverpool and Atletico, to be honest with you. So I will be very boring and I'll say Liverpool and Atletico.
Mo, will you stick with that toe the party line, Atletico and Liverpool?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to be a Maverick, but they're the 2 best teams in the group. They're going to come out of it.
Yeah, I agree. Right, full sweep so far. We're all in agreement. I've got a feeling we might not be in full agreement after the next group, Group F. And again, this theme of rematches and old friends and old rivalries being renewed, because United get themselves up against Villarreal, who we all know, and definitely Mo remembers, they lost on that ridiculous penalty shootout Europa League final last season. There's the potential for a bit of hangover, a bit of PTSD, or a bit of PTSD for United and and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer going into this one, Mo. So it seems only fair, as a United fan, that I'm going to have to ask you this. Given the fact that Solskjaer is so focused on winning a trophy, he has to win a trophy this season, or there's going to be even more big questions asked of him. Priority is the Premier League. Varane was brought in to shore up the defence. Sancho has come in to give another attacking option. Given the fact that he is going to be focused more on the domestic front, domestic cups and the Premier League, where does the Champions League rank in terms of Ole's priorities this season?
It's the Champions League, man. It's got to rank high. Even if your aim is to win the league or to try and win the league and whatnot, the Champions League has to rank highly because they've been embarrassed far too often in it. They've gone out in the group stages. Apart from that amazing game in PSG, which got him the caretaker job in the first place, he's not really done anything in the Champions League. I mean, all right, fine. He's had that win in Paris again, the win in Paris, but he needs to make a statement in the Champions League, right? They failed to win the Europa League 2 years. 2 years now they've tried. They were semi-finalists and then losing finalists, right? The final loss itself was kind of embarrassing. I mean, okay, fine, they had injuries and whatever, but Villarreal just sat on Bruno Fernandes and suddenly Man United had nothing, right? It was embarrassing. They need to do something in Europe. They need to make a statement in Europe. This is Man United. This is the first English club to blaze a trail in Europe. Their history is inexorably tied to the European Cup, even if they aren't necessarily, obviously they're not even like top 5 in terms of the clubs that have won it, but there is always an inherent romance attached to Man United. Watching Man United Champions League nights back on ITV, back in the day when it was only the only team in Europe. So he's got to do something. It may not be his chief priority, which is probably going to be trying to win the league, but he absolutely has to do something. And the thing is, though, with Jadon Sancho and Rafa Varane, Champions League Varane is his nickname. So they've got one of the ideal guys to help them improve in the Champions League, because Victor Lindelof is a liability, has got them knocked out of both Europe. The last two times they got knocked out of Europe in the Europa League, it was Victor Lindelof's fault. Now they've got Rafael Varane. They don't have to play Victor Lindelof. That's going to be huge. That alone is going to be huge and transformative, because Wan-Bissaka, Varane, Maguire, and Shaw, like, who's the worst defender in this? Probably Wan-Bissaka, and he's one of the best 1v1 defenders in the world, right? Maybe Shaw. So the centre backs suddenly are very solid. That's huge, right? There's no obvious weak point in defence. In attack, I mean, goodness gracious, Jadon Sancho, Bruno Fernandes, Edinson Cavani. Edinson Cavani is a legend of scoring, in Europe. Mason Greenwood is a sniper, is an absolute goal scoring machine in the making. The only question for United, as it always has been and always will be until they sign someone, is midfield. And you can't win in Europe with an average midfield. It doesn't work. Even Real Madrid, who won those 3 Champions Leagues in a row and weren't necessarily the best side, had a brilliant midfield. That's what they had. They had that great midfield, and they rode that to everything. The attack didn't always play well. Defense didn't always play well, but that midfield always played well. Barcelona, best team ever. Amazing midfield. Bayern Munich, treble. Toni Kroos, not Toni Kroos. The first treble had Toni Kroos. Second treble, Leon Goretzka, Joshua Kimmich. Right, the midfield, Thiago as well. The midfield is everything. Right, you got to control midfield. So United's midfield is a joke, to put it charitably. Right, unless they put Pogba in there, but then they don't really have a partner for Pogba. They haven't signed one, a defensive midfielder. They've got McTominay's out injured. Fred is Fred. Matic is about 5-6 years over the hill. Who have they got? They don't have anybody. So they're not going to win the Champions League. They will absolutely get found out quarterfinals, round of 16 stage by someone. But I think they will put forth the effort, and they've been given not a gimme group, because they're all kind of teams that can stifle United and bore them to death. But it's a winnable group. They're all beatable teams, every single one of them, even Villarreal, because United got more firepower now. Jadon Sancho, with Sancho and Bruno Fernandes and Paul Pogba and Mason Greenwood all playing well and not being absolutely drained by an entire season, they should have enough to beat Villarreal. And if they beat Villarreal, they're going to beat the other teams. They're going to win. They're probably going to win the group. The round of 16 depends on who they draw, and then I think they'll come across a quarterfinals. I actually get a very, very soft draw, because they aren't. Their midfield is a joke, and the better teams will exploit that. But there aren't any better teams in their group right now, so they can win it.
One arguable better team, RB Real, based on the Europa League final. Mo, need we remind you they were the better team on the night? Villarreal first.
Why do you keep reminding me?
Because it's fun. I love reminding United fans about that. Unai Emery, as we know, most successful manager in the history of the Europa League. He now gets a bit more of a kind of solid chance to test himself in the Champions League. And when you look at Villarreal's previous record in the Champions League, it is relatively good. Whenever they qualify, they always get out of the group. They've not failed to get out of the group in any time they've ever qualified for it. And their big business this season has actually been keeping players. We touched on this with Liverpool and one or two other sides previously, but Pau Torres staying, Gerard Moreno staying, and then signing a big long-term contract shows their ambition, shows where they want to be. Given the fact that maybe there's not been a lot of exciting transfers coming in, Juan Foyth and Issy Mandi have come in to add numbers to the back, but keeping Torres, keeping Moreno, keeping some of their midfield players as well, make sure that they're strong. And as Mo points out, Emre tactically knows how to set up for one-off games or two-legged matches that he has to play against. Villarreal could be a real threat in this.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I think the comparison to Liverpool is actually a really interesting one because, like Liverpool, well, probably forced into because maybe a lack of money, like a lot of teams around Europe, they have kind of had to consolidate what they have. And I think for a lot of clubs that have had to go down that route this summer, that might end up being a blessing in disguise. If Villarreal have been able to keep the squad that won the Europa League, if they've managed to keep a squad that can cause so much trouble to big teams, then it's only going to get better if they've had another season together. Key players have signed new contracts, and as you say, Emery knows how to set them up well. I think they are probably a perfect example of the kind of team that can really cause Man United huge issues in the group stage. I wouldn't be surprised if they finished above Man United in this group, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. And yeah, I think it's just a huge problem for Man United going forward. I mean, as Mo said, there's probably not a huge amount of issues with them getting out of this group, but I do wonder if Villarreal have kind of flown under the radar for a lot of people with the troubles at Real Madrid and Barcelona. All the kind of praise or focus is kind of landed on Atletico Madrid's feet because they obviously won the title last season. But you could argue that Villarreal are in just as strong position or even a better position they were last season, and therefore could and should be even better. So, I mean, I'm obviously no expert in Spanish football or Villarreal in particular, but I'm really excited to see how they can do in this group because I think they could quite easily finish second or quite easily tip Man United to first by causing them real problems in a one-off game, which, as you say, Emery very, very recently proved he can do without too much issue.
Before we grab some predictions on this one, Mo, I just want to ask you about Atalanta. Atalanta and Young Boys are the other two teams in this group. Atalanta find themselves in a little bit of a possible position of stagnation. Looking at the record over the last few seasons, 3 successive third-place finishes. That's consistency if you ever wanted to see it. But you then put yourself in a position, despite the fact that Atalanta have produced players that we've all had to kind of sit up and take notice of. Now they're in a position where those players are attracting attention and leaving. Christian Romero is probably the big one moving on to Tottenham this summer. Given the fact that they don't really necessarily seem to have gone forward, they haven't gone backwards, but they are stuck in this position whereby they've got very, very good players. They know that there's always the likelihood that they'll just get vultured by another big European side. This is a difficult group, granted, but as you said, from a United perspective, it is winnable. This is quite an open group because there's not one real dominant force. You've got United coming in, they're not title winners. Atlanta are not title winners. Villarreal are in by virtue of winning the Europa League. This is an open group, but Atalanta, you get the sense that maybe they're just stuck in traffic a little bit.
It could go either way. Honestly, that's how it is with Atalanta because they have this pressing style, this ferocious pressing style that could absolutely discombobulate United, as we saw with Leipzig, right? But then also, if United can cut through that pressing style, they could get annihilated, as we saw with Leipzig. RB Leipzig lost 5-0 at Old Trafford. Absolutely destroyed. They were awful. Nowhere near United. They won 3-2 or 3-1 at home and were way better than United. So it could go either. It's such a cop-out answer to say, but we literally can't predict what will happen with Atalanta. They could go to Old Trafford or the Madrigal and win. They could. They have that talent, right? But they could easily just get slapped to pieces. It's like Leeds, right? Leeds and Man United. Leeds are a terrible matchup for Man United because the way they play football is fantastic and open and expressive. But United are the kind of physically bullish, straight to the point of things team that just cut through that nonsense and just score goals. So they're like Real Madrid, like the Brazil team that undid Marcelo Bielsa's Chile in 2014 and 2010 World Cup. And 2014 World Cup as well, actually. Just cut straight to the point. No messing about. Get in there, get on with it. Right? The Atletico Madrid side that beat Athletic Bilbao in the 2012 Europa League final. Just that's the thing. So I really like Atalanta. They're going to be great fun to watch every single one of their games if you can. But honestly, Villarreal and especially Man United might just absolutely butcher them on the counter-attack.
Okay, so as much as you said you can't give us a prediction, I'm going to ask you for a prediction, but I'll give you a second. Stefan, we'll go to you first. Villarreal, United, Atalanta and Young Boys all in this one. Who is getting out? Who are the two into the last 16?
I'm going to go for Villarreal and Manchester United in that order, just to rain on Mo's parade, unfortunately.
Mo, come on, give it to us. Who are you going for? You're allowed to say United. We won't criticise you. I'm going for United. I'm agreeing with Stefan. Villarreal, United.
I think United will win the group. I think what will be interesting. I think obviously look, the history of United Champions League groups with Villarreal is 0-0 draws, and I think that's probably likely to happen again in Villarreal. But in Manchester, I just think the crowd being there, Jadon Sancho, I think is a complete game changing signing, because now they can't just mark Bruno Fernandes and shut United down, which is what they did last time, which worked last time. But Jadon Sancho, they can't now just mark Bruno Fernandes and shut Man United down. So I think Man United will win that game. Man United will win the group. I do think Villarreal will have a bit too much European savvy for Atalanta, and I think Atalanta, much as we all adore them, will get undone by Villarreal, and I think Atalanta finish third Europa League, and they might win the Europa League, but they're not going to get out the group. Man United, Villarreal.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be like Emery to win the Europa League. We all know he's terrible in that competition. Right, the final Premier League side is the defending champions, Chelsea. Thomas Tuchel obviously strolled into Stamford Bridge and went on to clinch the biggest prize of all at the back end of last season. But he's got a different challenge facing him this time round. They've got Juventus in their group as the big challengers, alongside Malmo and Zenit St. Petersburg. So, Stefan, I'm going to go to you first on this in terms of Thomas Tuchel. It's a very, very different landscape that he's now dealing with. When he came in for the second half of last season to replace Frank Lampard, he was in a position where it wasn't quite a free hit, but it was an open situation. If anything went wrong, the blame could be lumped on the previous manager. Tuchel, in fairness to him, didn't look for excuses. He didn't look to play that line, but now he's had a full pre-season. He's had a full time to prepare. He's had the opportunity to bring in players. Obviously, Lukaku is the major one that's come in to strengthen their attacking options. His time at Borussia Dortmund's an interesting comparison to this, of how he manages a pre-season, how he gets the team ready for a full campaign ahead. There's a lot expected of Chelsea, particularly with Lukaku coming back. Yes, Juventus are going to be difficult. Ronaldo, Mo touched on at the top of the show, may or may not still be there. We don't really know what's going to happen with that. But in terms of Tuchel and Chelsea, it's a different set of pressure this time round. How do you see him reacting to that, given the fact that they're defending champions and the fans will be demanding that they're in the Premier League title race?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because he kind of had a lot of good grace when he first arrived at the club in January, hit the ground running, could really do no wrong. But now this season, he's up against in the Premier League. They'll be expected to challenge for the Champions League again, even though very few clubs have managed to do that. But I think in Thomas Tuchel, Chelsea do legitimately have one of, if not the best manager in the world. I legitimately think I really would put him above maybe Pep Guardiola, Jurgen Klopp, for example, as well, in terms of his ability to go into clubs and get them playing well. The kind of thing that I think is quite interesting for Chelsea is that at Dortmund and then at PSG, he was very competent, he's very capable of building squads that can challenge for major titles domestically, and in PSG's case, challenge for the Champions League. But one thing another led to him falling out with people at the club. Now, the interesting thing is, ahead of him moving to Chelsea, everyone assumed that it was Tuchel that was the problem, and he was the problem in the changing room, and it would only be a matter of time before he fell out with board member, director, club owner, whatever, star player. But if you look back at his time at Dortmund, he fell out with the club because the way that they sell star players when he's in the middle of building a squad, which I think is justifiable. At PSG, he fell out with Leonardo because of his kind of ad hoc transfer policy. I guess we have to wait and see if Pochettino can make that work. But again, Mbappe moving on, possibly, you might find that they're also quite erratic in a transfer window. And, Tuchel may have been justified in that regard. And it turns out Chelsea, he's actually things just seem to be going along to what he wants. He's getting his ducks in a row. He already inherited arguably one of the best squads in Europe. He's been able to add to it with Lukaku. He might be able to add to it again with Koundé. He's got all the tools in place to comfortably challenge the Premier League title and the Champions League. And this season will be the one, I think, where he'll prove, to a lot of maybe critics saying, well, I'm not the trouble starter that I've been kind of characterised at other clubs. Chelsea are a tremendously well-oiled machine, especially when it comes to transfers. They're probably one of the most astute clubs in the transfer market in the world. And if Tuchel can be left to just kind of deal with the squad, I think he can prove once again that he's a tremendous manager. And I actually would, even though a lot of talk's been around PSG with Lionel Messi and Man City with Ronaldo, I think Chelsea are probably the favourites for the Champions League this season.
Yeah, Tuchel is brilliant, and Chelsea's transfer policy is fantastic. Marina Granovskaya doesn't get anywhere near as much appreciation as she should do. She's like Monchi level, but for elite clubs. Like she constantly gets it right, and then when she gets it wrong, she can move the player on with basic to make almost like with that no loss. Right, they're going to get 30 million for Kurt Zouma, I think, from West Ham. That's incredible business. She's she's a really smooth operator in the market. She gave Frank Lampard this amazing squad. Frank Lampard couldn't do anything with it. So she brought in Thomas Tuchel, which is a brilliant appointment. He's a fantastic coach. I wouldn't say he's better than Guardiola, but he's fantastic. He's wonderful. I'm a big fan of his, and I love what he did. I don't love it because they were awful to watch, but I so respect what he did with Chelsea last season. He came in and was like, right, okay, you guys can't score goals for toffee. We're just going to defend really solidly and score the odd goal here and there. We're not going to make mistakes. We're going to wait for our opponents to make mistakes, and we're going to score goals. And it worked, and it's brilliant. And now he's got Lukaku. Now he can score goals. Now it's going to be interesting to see how does he make the jump from, okay, we're just really solid defensively and we're going to pick you off, to we're going to play attacking football. Or my point is he going to even do that at all? Because if you look at how Lukaku plays, people assume he's this big Drogba type, but he's not. He's basically Timo Werner, but good, in that he runs the channels, makes very intelligent runs off the ball into space, links to play well, and then just scores goals. Like, obviously he has power that Werner doesn't have, but he's not a big target man striker. He doesn't necessarily necessitate that you have to play big, all-out attacking football. I think they'll just play very similarly to how they played last year on the break. Maybe they'll be a bit more offensive. They'll use Reece James a bit more as a wing-back, try and get him involved in the game. But essentially their midfield is still going to stay the same, uncreative, defensive, Kante, Jorginho, Kovacic, that sort of thing. And they'll just burst forward with them. And then instead of Werner running into space, it'll be Lukaku. Like, if Werner could finish, Chelsea would have been, 3-0 up in the first 20 minutes of the Champions League final? Like, first 25 minutes, they had how many chances did Werner blow? So you just put Lukaku in Werner's place in that exact same team playing that exact same way. And that's already a massive sort of evolution, as it were, taken care of, because now the guy scores goals. So they're terrifying. They're legitimately, I agree, they're one of the favourites, again, to win the Champions League and the Premier League. I think Granovskaya has really put together an amazing squad. Tuchel is an amazing manager. He'll get sacked eventually. Everyone gets sacked at Chelsea. It'll be in a year or two. He'll say something and upset the wrong person, or they won't win for 5 games or something, and he'll get sacked. But right now, he's the guy. They trust him right now. He's won the Champions League. I think he's got a very, very good shot to win in the league and the Champions League again. He's a phenomenal coach. They've got a phenomenal squad. Chelsea is serious business.
Before we call this group, Mo, I'm going to throw it back to you on Juventus. Obviously, time of recording, transfer window just around the corner. We're stuck in the Cristiano custard. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, whether he's going to stay, whether he's going to go. That's still a moving project. It's an interesting summer for Juventus. Obviously, the hegemony in Serie A was broken last season. Inter clinching the title. 8 straight titles for Juventus was ended by Antonio Conte and Romelu Lukaku, both of whom have now left.
9. It was 9.
9, sorry, I beg your pardon, who've now moved on, left the San Siro, and Max Allegri's come back in. That poor season cost Andrea Pirlo his job, but because so much of this does hang on Ronaldo and what happens, everything is geared towards his movements in the next few days, and transfers not been wildly exciting. Weston McKennie's made his loan move permanent, and Federico Chiesa is into the second year of his loan. Max Allegri's brief is going to be fairly simple. He's going to rely on a lot of the players that he relied on last time around, that experienced core right the way through the team. But ultimately, if Ronaldo moves on, they've got a big blow and a big, big gap in the squad to fill.
They weren't going to win the Champions League, let's be clear. Even with Ronaldo, even with Cristiano Ronaldo, they weren't going to win the Champions League, right? And they're still not going to win the Champions League unless their defenders all have some miracle season and all stay fit. It's not going to happen, right? And their goalie isn't good enough. Let's be honest on that. You don't win the goalie. You don't win the Champions League. I said you don't win the Champions League with average midfield. No Champions League winner has had a back goalie as bad as Szczesny. Like, you can't go back as far as you want. I think you might have to go back to Dida to find Champions League goalie as bad and erratic as Szczesny. And even then, Dida was pretty boss at the time.
Dudek for Liverpool.
Yeah, but then he was the opposite. He's the exception that proves the rule, because he went absolutely God mode in the final and won them the final. So yeah, but Dudek. But you don't win the Champions League with a goalie like Szczesny, and they're not going to win the Champions League. They weren't going to win it anyway. What they're doing is they're rebuilding. They're rebuilding around Freddie Chiesa. They're rebuilding around Alvaro Morata, who is very limited, but is very good at bringing others into play. Others like Freddie Chiesa, and is very good at heading the ball. And Juan Cuadrado is very good at crossing the ball. Morata scored 6 goals, I think, Champions League last year. He's a good player. He's a very, very good player. He seems happy in Turin. If nowhere else, he's happy in Turin. He scores goals there. I don't think they'll miss Ronaldo all that much. Obviously, you miss in Europe. In the league, they'll miss him because he just chunders over everybody. But I think what will happen is you'll see Kulusevski and Chiesa step up, take the shots he was taking. He cannibalizes the team shots when he plays Cristiano, which is fair enough. Whatever, he's a very good goal scorer. So I think Chiesa and Kulusevski will take his shots, and Juventus will carry on. They'll drop down a few goals in Serie A, but in the Champions League, I don't think it'll make much of a difference. I think they'll still be pretty good. They could be pretty dangerous. They won't beat Chelsea. They don't have what it takes to beat Chelsea. No one in that group does. But they'll get out of the group, I think. They'll finish second. And I think let's see what happens then.
Right, before we take a quick break, let's call this Cristiano custard aside. Stefan, who is coming out of this group? Zenit St. Petersburg and Malmo complete the 4, but Chelsea, Juventus, you'd expect to be the favourites. Who are you going for?
Yeah, I think this is pretty straightforward. I'm going for Chelsea first, Juventus second.
Mo, would you match up with that?
Yeah, same here. It's very predictable.
Yeah, I agree. We've been having a lot of agreement so far. Great stuff. Right, we are going to take a quick break. After the break, it's C, D, E and G that we're going to be getting ourselves through. Barcelona, Bayern Munich, Inter Milan, Real Madrid. Loads more to come. Make sure you check us out in just a second. Hello and welcome back to the Squawka Talker Weekly Podcast. This week it is all about the Champions League. The Champions League draw has been made and we all know now who the great and good of European football will be matched against at the group stage this season. In part 1, we talked about the Premier League. 4 entrants this season: Chelsea, Manchester United, Manchester City and Liverpool. Now we're going to look across to the non-Premier League side of the draw. Group C. Bundesliga giants Borussia Dortmund, they're up against Sporting Lisbon, Ajax and Besiktas. Now, Borussia Dortmund, Stefan, we're going to go to you first on this. Perceptions, situations in terms of German football. There's been a huge managerial merry-go-round this summer and Borussia Dortmund have found themselves right in the middle of it. Marco Rose has taken over the hot seat at the Westfalenstadion, who we kind of don't really know a massive amount about in terms of outside of the Bundesliga. Borussia Dortmund is always a club that people keep an eye on. There's always a massive interest in them in terms of how they're expected to perform. So I just wanted to kind of throw this over to you and get a bit of the lowdown on him. Given the fact that he has got big shoes to fill coming into the club, there will be expectations of them challenging for the Bundesliga and making a splash in the Champions League. How have the early days of Rose gone?
Mixed results, I think, is probably the best way to put it. They started off tremendously well with a 5-2 thumping of Eintracht Frankfurt in the first weekend of the Bundesliga, in which Erling Haaland was just tremendous. And, it couldn't have been a perfect start for Rosa. It showcased his kind of 4-4-2 diamond formation. It showed how he was going to get the best out of Haaland, and it also showed how Dortmund were going to be able to replace Jadon Sancho without really replacing Jadon Sancho. They brought in Daniel Malin from PSV. I think a few people thought he might moved on, came in as an almost like-for-like winger, but he's actually more of a kind of number 10 or number 9 who can kind of play off Haaland. So the tactics have changed. They brought in Gregor Kobel as well as a very competent goalkeeper to fix a position which has kind of haunted Dortmund for the last 5, 6, 7 years. So, they kind of have all the building blocks there to really build a proper squad, but right after that impressive start, they go into the Super Cup against Bayern Munich, a Bayern Munich team who are up against a huge amount of pressure themselves, which we can talk about later on. But they were kind of picked apart. And on the day, it came down to just kind of individual quality. Robert Lewandowski just finding space to score goals, really. And then after that, they then went to Freiburg, who are kind of a famous kind of difficult away tie in German football, and they lost the weekend there. So definitely, a lot to improve on. I think we're still kind of waiting for this team to kind of fall into place for Marc Rosa, which is probably expected, to be honest with you. But it just remains to be seen whether they can kind of get their act together before the title race kind of pulls away from them. I don't really expect Bayern Munich to be as kind of unstoppable as they have been in the last couple of years under Hansi Flick. I think they've got their own problems that they'll have to deal with themselves. But I think in terms of the Champions League, they've actually been kind of dealt quite a good blow here, or not a good blow, a good deal here, because got 3 teams in Ajax, Sporting and Besiktas who they should be able to beat. I think Dortmund, by and large, are okay in the Champions League group stages, unless they get a really bad run, which they did a few years ago with Barcelona and PSG, I think it was. So, I think they've got the players that can really break down those teams. And I think they shouldn't have too much problems getting through to the last 16. And that should maybe help them overall, because it means they can keep their focus on the Bundesliga, which, last couple of seasons, they've kind of been a little overrun by the Champions League to an extent in the group stages. And then that's meant they start dropping points in the Bundesliga, and basically they're out of the title race before Christmas. So this kind of draw may allow them to focus more on the Bundesliga. It may allow Marco Rose to kind of embed his tactics and his ideas better domestically and keep Bayern within arm's distance.
Looking at this group, Mo, it's an interesting situation because Dortmund are still favourites, particularly because they have Haaland at the top of the team, but they find themselves up against three domestic champions at the group stage. Sporting Lisbon, Ajax and Besiktas all come into this as winners of their domestic leagues at the end of 2020-21, but we still fancy Dortmund to have enough with Haaland, with the rest of the players, to get through this group. How do you see it panning out in terms of who's going through to the last 16?
Well, I mean, Dortmund, right? They got Haaland, who's top goal scorer last season in Champions League, UEFA Forward of the Year, youngest player to ever been nominated, ever to win that. He's a phenomenon. He's a terrifying human being. He's football's Eren Yeager. You ever watch Attack on Titan? Just turning into a giant monster at a moment's notice and annihilating everyone in front of him. Who goes after him? I mean, anyone's guess. It's a Europa League. It's a Europa League little tournament down there. I mean, not literally just because the loser qualifies for Europa League, but because they're Europa League double team. Sporting Portugal, fantastic, nice little outfit. They won the league last year, but carrying that into the Champions League is always difficult. Ajax have got some very good players. Gravenberch, love him. But can they? Their level has declined because, like you said in the intro, they've been picked apart. Like 3 years ago, they had Frankie de Jong and Matthijs de Ligt. Now they don't. So, what can Ajax do? I don't know. Well, I think Ajax will probably be the ones to do it just because I think they've got more experience of doing it in the Champions League. They know what they're doing. They've been here before. They've been to this radio before. They will negotiate the group with greater ease and assurance than the other teams will. And I just think Dortmund will steamroller everybody with Haaland. Unless he gets injured or something, I can't see Dortmund not winning, honestly, every single game. Haaland is just that good. Like, I think he's the phenomenon that everyone should be worried about, not Mbappe. If the race to sign him next summer is going to be the real race. That's the real one. But yeah, I think Haaland is absolutely incredible. I think Dortmund will win the group, and I think Ajax second.
Villarreal really have got into your brain. So you're going with Dortmund and Ajax 1-2.
They haunt me at night.
Dortmund and Ajax as a 1-2 for you, Mo. Stefan, would you agree, or are you going for somebody else?
No, I think that's probably a good shout. I mean, Sporting might upset a few people just because they're pot one side, so they do have the opportunity to upset. But yeah, I can't look beyond Ajax. I think they're very, as Mo says, despite losing a lot of players, still a very impressive side.
Right, let's move across to Group D. Inter Milan, Real Madrid, Shakhtar Donetsk and Sheriff Tiraspol. Before we talk about the great and good of Real Madrid, quick word for Tiraspol, first ever Moldovan team to qualify for the group stages. Brilliant stuff for them. They're going to be playing at the San Siro. They're going to be playing at the Santiago Bernabeu. It's going to be a fantastic season for them. But unfortunately, the likelihood is that they are unlikely to get anywhere. Real Madrid, Stefan, we'll go to you on this one. Carlo Ancelotti's glorious return has been a bit low-key. No major transfers coming in just yet. Asterix, Mbappe. David Alaba is the only new face really of note to come in on a free transfer after he left Bayern Munich. But it's an interesting setup for Ancelotti. We know how successful he is as a player and as a manager in the Champions League. He knows what to do in these games. And as cliched and as old-fashioned as that sounds, it is the truth. Zidane pretty much did exactly the same during his time in charge. He just knew what to do on those big Champions League nights to get them through and get them winning games. Ancelotti's been a bit of a difficult start. They obviously won the opening game against Alaves, but then got a few scares against Levante last time out. Can he squeeze another tune? We talked about squeezing the lemon. I'm going to go with squeezing a tune out of this old team this season, because they are old, let's be honest. Benzema, Modric, Kroos, average age is much higher than a lot of other teams in the Champions League this season, but they do have what a lot of other teams don't have, which is a huge amount of experience.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, I'm not as kind of downbeat on Real Madrid as maybe some others are. I think maybe, I don't know if it's maybe just a modern football phenomenon that we are so obsessed with age that we think anyone past the age of like 28 is basically past it. I still think I think there's still a lot more to come. Well, maybe not a lot more to come, but there's still a lot more juice in the tank for guys like Luca Modric. I watched him tear apart my Scotland team at the Euros as if he could have done it in his slippers. So he's obviously never really a player that's had to run around the pitch like mad. So I think he's still got plenty to offer. Tony Cruz, I thought interestingly when he opted to retire from the German national team this summer, specifically said he did so because he still wants to put another couple of years in at Real Madrid. And then you've got that front line, which despite its age still has quite a lot to prove. Obviously, Torgan Hazard, Eden Hazard, he's just come back from a huge injury. He'll have a huge amount to prove if he can stay fit. But if he can stay fit, I think you've probably got a player there with quite a lot of inspiration to do well. If Ancelotti can keep Gareth Bale off the golf courses and actually trying, then there's a tremendous player there. I mean, I actually thought, if you look at his numbers for Tottenham last season, they weren't even that bad, actually. He's still a perfectly good player there. And I think Benzema's still a tremendous forward. I think he proved that in the Euros. I think he proved that last season for Real Madrid. He was probably their best player, in my opinion. Thoroughly enjoyed watching him. And then, as you say, if they can sign Mbappe, that's a game changer overnight for them. I think they suddenly go from maybe being like 8th or 9th favourites for the Champions League right up to one of the best, because there are problems in this team. There aren't, as most said, the midfield maybe. I mean, if you take Modric or Cruz of that team and there's suddenly Isco or Valverde, then maybe there's problems there. But just having someone like Mbappe, and then if you've got guys like Hazard and Bale who are even close to what they've been in the past, then I think Madrid still have a huge amount of bite that they can bring to this team. And if Ancelotti can get them all playing well, if you can get them all looking happy, then there is a team there that can do something.
Ancelotti is great at getting people happy. That's the one thing I'll say. He's fantastic at getting people to be happy and cheerful. And that's why I think Hazard might even have a great season this year, finally. I mean, maybe. Who the hell knows, honestly. Bale, I don't think is there for very long. He's there for a year to see out his contract, and then he's going to go. He'll go to somewhere else. He'll retire. Whatever. He's just chilling. The thing with Madrid is not just old. They're tired. There's a lot of age, there's a lot of minutes in those legs. Like a lot of these guys have been playing constantly. Modric looked dead on his feet after the last World Cup, and then he sort of during the lockdown, something happened, and he came back from lockdown looking like $1 million. He's been amazing ever since then. 35, 36. He looks like he's 25, but. Look, Cruz is phenomenal. Modric is phenomenal. Casemiro is great. But Madrid have always had these flaws, right? Where if you can get behind their defense, right? If you can get behind their midfield, behind Casemiro, they're just acres in front of their defense. Now, often that was then bailed out by Courtois, by Ramos and Varane being so solid. They're both gone. It's Eder Militao and Nacho, right? Now, Eder Militao is good, but he's not Rafa Varane. And Nacho is never Sergio Ramos. Right, so that's a huge thing, a huge blow to them, to their mental belief. Ramos pulled them through so many games by sheer mental belief. Their big Champions League, the Decima, because of Sergio Ramos. The 2016 title, because of Sergio Ramos. So the two foundational Champions Leagues that then started their run came because of him, and he's gone now. So that's going to be interesting to see what happens. Kylian Mbappe, look, I love Kylian Mbappe. He's world class. He's amazing. I also watched him get knocked out of the game by Junior Firpo last year, playing on the wrong side of a three-man defense. So I'm not completely sold that Kylian Mbappe is going to make them into the game-changing, world-busting, ball-breaking team that they all think he is, right? In the league, yes. When you're just chundering over teams in the league, yes. They sign Mbappe, they're favourites to win La Liga instantly. Champions League is different, right? Can you do it when the big moment, when the chips are down? Can you find a way to get it done? Madrid never even really played well on their two of their Champions League wins in the 3-0. The 2017 one, they were fantastic. But 2016, 2018, they never really even played well. They just sort of showed up when they had to and did what they had to get the goals. This team still has that in them. Definitely. Would never rule them out. But I just think the lack of Ramos, the lack of that winning mentality, because Carlo Ancelotti, like I said, when things are going good, it's all thumbs up, baby. He's fantastic. When things start to get a bit rocky, ooh. Now, do you remember his Chelsea team? 10 years ago now, I'm going to go back 10 years. They were fantastic. They beat Wigan 8-0. They're beating teams 7 and 8-0 end of the season. They won the double in 2009-10. Phenomenal side. Start of the next season, they're just steamrolling everyone. You're thinking this is the next great English side. They had a little speed bump with some coaching problems behind the scenes and some players getting a bit injured in around December that year, and they just collapsed into a pit. Carlo Ancelotti can't resurrect things when it starts to go wrong. When things are going right, he's fantastic. So as long as Madrid can keep things going right all season, they'll do well. as soon as things start to go a bit wrong, Carlo's gonna wobble, gonna have a bit of wobble. I like Real Madrid a lot as a team. I think they're very good. I don't know about Mbappe making them one of the favourites. Let's see.
I really hope that Ancelotti uses Wigan as a motivation at Real Madrid. I can't wait for that team talk at the Bernabeu. If we can do it at Wigan, you can do it against Barcelona, or maybe at the Nou Camp. Imagine that. We won in Wigan and we won in Barcelona. Fantastic stuff. Right, Inter Milan, Stefan, we're going to flick across to them now. This is a very odd situation for Inter Milan because they won the league and then their managers left and their best players left. Antonio Conte has moved on to pastures new and Romelu Lukaku has joined Chelsea. Achraf Hakimi, who was obviously massively important for them, has also gone. He's joined PSG. But Simone Inzaghi's come in, solid reputation developed at Lazio. Obviously, he's quite well respected within coaching circles in Serie A. He's earned his stripes and now he's got himself a crack at a big job. But they're defending champions, but have lost two of the biggest building blocks from that squad. Denzel Dumfries has come in as a replacement for Hakimi. Edin Dzeko has come in for a kind of replacement for Lukaku, and Hakan Çalhanoğlu was crossed from the red and black of AC to the black and blue of Inter this season. But it's very difficult to get a handle on them with Lukaku gone because they weren't all about Lukaku last season, but he was so central to everything they did. He was absolutely phenomenal. He's now gone. You're asking Dzeko to replace those goals and replace those performances. How do we see them placed going into the Champions League this season?
Yeah, I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head there. It's impossible to kind of gauge what they will be because almost paradoxically, they are the Italian champions. But at the same time, we really don't know what to expect of them. Lukaku is such a big part of that team. Hakimi, huge part of that team. I think Mo can probably offer more on this because he was waxing lyrically about these players before we started recording. But I think they've brought in some astute signings, some guys who might be able to cover the players that have moved on. But in Inzaghi, can he do what Conte offered? Maybe he can offer more in Europe, possibly. But there are building blocks there to kind of put together a really decent squad there. I mean, Çalhanoğlu is obviously a player who's done well. I mean, he did well in Germany, did very well at Milan. He might be able to kind of paper over some of the cracks in that team going forward, especially if they've got someone like Dzeko sitting up front. I'll maybe let Mo kind of go on more about this because I feel like I'd just be repeating everything he said before we started recording.
Yeah, look, Stefan hit the nail on the head there, right? We'll get to the players in a minute, but the coaching change is going to help Inter in the Champions League. Antonio Conte is great at winning league titles. He's great at motivating teams. He's rubbish in Europe. He's absolute garbage in Europe. I don't know why, but he is. Look at Inter in the last two Champions League group stages they've been in. They've bombed out both times. They've had it in their hands and they've bombed out. They lost twice last year to an absolutely terrible Real Madrid team, right? A Real Madrid team that got doubled by Shakhtar Donetsk, right? Mana Solomon, Tyson. Who are these guys? They doubled Real Madrid. Bruges got a 2-2 draw. Gladbach almost knocked them out. Bottled it right in the last game. Inter, Conte does not do Champions League, does not do European competition. I don't know why, but he doesn't. Simone Inzaghi isn't Conte. So you've taken a similar squad and you've put it in Europe with a manager who doesn't crumple when he hears the Champions League anthem, right? That's a huge lift already. Look, anyone misses Lukaku, who was their top goal scorer, their top assister last year, right? Anyone would miss that. He's world-class forward. Dzeko's really, really good, though. Dzeko is really, really good, completely and utterly underrated for the last, 12 years. The guy won the Bundesliga with Graffiti, with Wolfsburg, right? When it came to Man City, helped them win the Premier League. Everyone remembers Aguero. Dzeko scored the equalising goal in that game against QPR, right? He was a bigger figure than Aguero in the 2014 title, and him and Yaya Toure fired them to the win. Right? He's a phenomenal player. He's absolutely incredible, all-round talent, really talented, really skillful. He's a great link man as well. And they've still got Lautaro Martinez, right? Who can now step up and take more shots and score more goals. They've got Çalhanoğlu and Dzeko, and they've already got a great understanding, those two. They're both linked up. They've got 1 goal, 1 assist each in the opening game. They win against Genoa. They look really good. They've still got Nico Barrea, who was so good at the Euros for Italy, right? They've got Dumfries, who's like a sort of Dutch Hakimi. Not as good as Hakimi, obviously, but still very good. We saw at the Euros again at wing-back, he can be a real threat, a real handful. Perisic is a dogged worker. Their defence is still the same, getting better. Skriniar, Devay, Bastoni, who I think is phenomenal. Alessandro Bastoni. Keep an eye on him if you're interested in defenders. Brozovic is still there in midfield, right? They've still got a very, very good team. The question is just going to be who can score the goals. Now Lukaku isn't going to do that. If Çalhanoğlu, if early indications to go by Dzeko and Çalhanoğlu can have a very good relationship, they can keep things ticking over. You bring in Lautaro Martinez, now you're cooking with gas. Inter are going to be serious business. It wouldn't surprise me if they beat Real Madrid in one of the 2 games this season, and they'll definitely get out of the group. They might even challenge Madrid to win the group. To be honest, I'm really high on Inter.
Tirapsala, we mentioned before, Stefan, first ever representatives for Moldova. They're in this one alongside Zenit St. Petersburg, but really it's all eyes on Inter and Real Madrid. Can you just see it's going to be straightforward for Madrid and Inter, or could you see maybe a little Moldovan surprise?
A Moldovan surprise sounds like a horrible euphemism there, but I think I'll probably have to...
Or a delicious dessert.
I guess that just shows where my mind goes, I suppose, in these things. I think, this kind of strikes me as a kind of almost an old-fashioned Champions League group. It's kind of changed a lot now because of the seedings and how teams qualify. But this looks very much like a top 2, bottom 2 situation. So I can't look beyond Real Madrid and Inter.
Mo, would you agree? Straightforward, Real Madrid and Inter into the last 16.
Yeah, I think if Real Madrid get Mbappe, they'll win the group. If they don't get Mbappe, Inter win the group. But they'll both go through.
Right, moving across to the next group. We've got 2 groups still to go. We talked about hangovers with United and Villarreal before, but they probably don't come much bigger than this one, Stefan. Barcelona and Bayern Munich. The last time these two faced each other, it was the infamous 2028-2 to Bayern Munich. That cost Quique Setien his job. Ronald Koeman has come in, and it's probably fair to say that he's done an okay job all round. He's now going into his second full season, not particularly tearing up any trees. Last season, they fell away in the title race. Lionel Messi has obviously left the club this summer. He's brought in Memphis Depay, Eric Garcia and Sergio Aguero, although he won't be fit until in and around October time. So I want to look at Bayern Munich first. We talk about this result and the fact that that might have a little bit of a psychological edge over Barcelona. Julian Nagelsmann has taken over the biggest job in Bundesliga football, and we all know what set of pressure that comes with. We talked about Juve and their utter dominance of Serie A. Bayern Munich have that on another level, particularly in the last decade, where it's just winning the title is par. Nagelsmann knows that. He knows that that is just an expected achievement within Bundesliga. But then the Champions League comes in as an added pressure. Obviously, they won it back in 2020, beating PSG in the final. How has he coped so far? We talked about the early days of Rose. How are the early days of Nagelsmann gone so far?
Yeah, it's really interesting, actually. They've had a really good week. They won the Super Cup. They didn't come back from behind. Cologne came back to go 2-2, and then they won a last-minute winner against Cologne at the weekend. And then Joshua Kimmich, who is kind of billed as the next club captain, signed a new long-term contract. So, there's a kind of feel-good factor at Bayern, which has kind of long been hoped for, because there's been a summer of very little transfer business. The club have been really constricted by their finances. And although these things don't really matter in the grand scheme of things, they've looked absolutely pants in pre-season friendlies. So there was a bit of concern going into the season that things weren't really ticking very well. You had guys like Kingsley Coman suggesting they might want to move on. Robert Lewandowski's agent was just doing a tour of every major city in Europe, apparently, according to German media. So courting bids from all sorts. So it kind of felt like things might have been brewing under the surface, but after a couple of decent wins, particularly beating Dortmund in the Super Cup, things are kind of back on track now. However, having said that, I do kind of think this Barcelona side could be a huge banana skin for Bayern Munich, and being perfectly honest with you, for 2 different reasons. One, everyone thinks they're terrible, so there'll be a huge amount of pressure on Nagelsmann, perhaps more than just whatever Bayern Munich manager deals with, particularly in their first season. But to really kind of, maybe not repeat the 8-2, that'd be ridiculous, but to really make sure that they thump Barcelona, because, Barcelona are down, they're, out of luck, blah, blah, blah. And I've got to be honest with you, as silly as it might sound, even without Lionel Messi, I still think, man for man, this Barcelona squad's not that bad. I mean, I agree with you that Ronald Koeman's maybe not the most inspiring manager in the world, but they kind of held on in the title race up until maybe a few weeks before the end last season. They came undone in the Champions League against some decent sides, and I really don't expect Barcelona to properly challenge in the Champions League, but I think they've got the quality, the individual quality, that can upset a Bayern Munich team if It still hasn't clicked into gear, and I'm really not sure Bayern have probably clicked into gear. Nagelsmann himself said rather that he doesn't really expect the team to kind of click into gear till about Christmas time. So if Barcelona can kind of put together a decent run, if Koeman can actually build a hard-working, balanced team without Messi, I actually think they might be a decent opponent for Bayern Munich. So I wouldn't go so far as to say it's a foregone conclusion by any means.
Yeah, this is the thing, isn't it? Right. The 8-2. One thing overlooked about the 8-2, right, is that for that first half, it was basically an even game, and Barca had as many chances to create goals as Bayern did. The difference is Barca had two 33-year-olds up front who could barely sprint, and Bayern were just flipping lasers, like running everywhere, and that was the difference ultimately, because the Bayern defense in that game and that whole season, frankly, was just as creaky as the Barca one. They had Alaba looking completely out of sorts. Boateng was just sort of there, but they were so good in attack, it didn't really matter. No one really realized. Barca, on the other hand, were not that good in attack because Suarez can't score, struggles to score. Messi was 33, and the defense was then exposed, right? PK Longley, old, slow, not very strong. PK's kind of strong. Longley is just like a magnet for bad luck and nonsense. So, that was very, but the thing is, it's changed now. Not only is they don't have any 33-year-olds in attack, Memphis Depay is phenomenal, and they're probably by that time going to have Ansu Fati back, or maybe Ousmane Dembele too. Maybe not Dembele, but Ansu Fati certainly. Brathwaite, if he plays, is not good. Don't get me wrong, but he runs. He's got great physical energy, and they've got that midfield, the best midfield I still think in the world. They're as good as anybody. Pedri, Frenkie, and Busquets. Frenkie de Jong, Pedri, and Sergio Busquets. Phenomenal midfield, right? As we saw at the Euros, they basically carried Spain to the semis of the Euros, with Spain having a joke defense, a joke goalie, and a joke forward line. But they made the semis and should have won the semis because of that midfield. So, as we said before, midfield can win you anything, right? Barca have the best midfield around, I think, or one of them anyway. Their defense was the big worry, the big problem against Bayern before. PK, as I said, PK Longley, Sergio Roberto, right back, good lord, Jordi Alba. But now, theoretically, and this is where it's not set, right? You could put out a defensive Serginho Dest, Jordi Alba. Serginho Dest, by the way, who was wanted by Bayern, who turned down Bayern to go to Barcelona, which sounds really weird when you say it out loud, but he did. And then Ronald Araujo and Oscar Mingueza. Now, you may not have heard of Araujo or Mingueza, but what they are is they're both strong, they're both aggressive, and they're both rapid. They're fast. And Araujo is also massive and really good in the air. He's Uruguayan. What Bayern exposed about the last Barca defense, the fact that they were old and slow, is not there in this current Barca defense. Now, don't get me wrong, Ronald Koeman being Ronald Koeman, he could just as well play Gerard Piqué and Eric Garcia, two defenders who are not fast, who are very slow, and Eric Garcia, we've seen, is massively susceptible to any sort of pace, and so is Piqué. So Koeman is Koeman, so I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if he has the good sense to play Araujo, or one of Araujo and Mingueza, or ideally both of them, and Dest and Alba, that's going to help cover them at the back against the electric pace of Bayern's attack. And let's be clear, I'm not downplaying Bayern. Bayern are phenomenal. And in attack, Memphis Depay, there was only 3 players in Europe's top 5 leagues last year who had more than 20 goals, 20 or more goals, and 10 more assists. Harry Kane, Romelu Lukaku, and Memphis Depay. All right? So he's a really, really, really good player. He's a really special player. He wanted to play for Barca all his life. He loves Ronald Koeman, gets on well with him, understands how to play false nine for him. He's already got 1 assist to his name, 1 assist, 1 goal in his first 2 La Liga games. He could be the new talisman. He's not Lionel Messi. No one's Lionel Messi, right? But Barca had Lionel Messi for how many years? How many Champions Leagues have they won since Pep Guardiola left? 1. And they've had Lionel Messi that whole time, and he's been the best player in the world that whole time, right? So maybe you don't need the best player in the world to win the Champions League. Maybe what you need is a team that presses all together as one, which they can do now. A team that works hard. And you need a little bit of stardust, but then you've got Memphis Depay. You've got Ansu Fati, who is phenomenal, youngest ever goal scorer in the Champions League history. But like Stefan says, their squad on paper is actually phenomenal. They can be a contender. They won't win it. They're not going to win it, but they'll be a contender.
I'm going to assume that we're going for a Barcelona-Bayern 1-2 in this one. Benfica and Dynamo Kiev are the other 2 teams. Stefan, Barca and Bayern?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think Benfica look like a really decent side, but yeah, I'm going to go for Bayern and Barcelona.
Mo, would you agree with that? Bayern and Barca straight through?
Bayern and Barca straight through. If Barca play Araujo and Mingueza, they can top the group because they can beat Bayern Munich, but they won't play them, so they won't top the group, so they'll finish second.
Okay, fair enough. Right, the final group is Group G. Mo joked before that Group C had a bit of a Europa League feel about it. Group G definitely does. Lille, Sevilla, RB Salzburg and Wolfsburg. We're going to talk about Sevilla first, Mo. I'll throw this one over to you. In terms of summer transfer business, it's been relatively positive. Monchi's been at it again, getting some good players in. They've obviously lost Brian Hill, who's gone to Tottenham. Eric Lamela's gone in the opposite direction. We don't really know who's got the better end of that deal, but some sensible business. Rafa Mir has come in on the back of looking good for Huesca last season. Wolves are obviously dying to get rid of him. He's looked good for Spain as well, so that's someone that will add goals. Interesting right the way through the rest of the team. Marko Dimitrovic, released by Eibar, has come in and probably will take the number 1 jersey, mainly because he's absolutely terrifying. Ludwig Augustinsson will come in to add a number in defence. But Thomas Delaney, coming in from Borussia Dortmund, is probably the most eye-catching signing. He's been a real soldier for Dortmund over the years and for the Danish national team. Things look good for Sevilla. Lopetegui looks like he's still hungry, like he wants to do well, despite the fact that we always kind of put them on the edge of the La Liga title race conversation. They made a fist of it at the back end of last season. How excited are you? Yes, they've lost Kiel, and he's a big, big blow, but they've kept all their other good players. At this stage, Jules Koundé hasn't left. It looks good for them this season.
I'm excited, man. I think they're going to be great. Brian Hill is no loss to Sevilla, right? They didn't rate him. They didn't want him. They've got Eric Lamela, who scored 3 times in 2 games for La Liga. So, they're doing all right, man. They've got a really good team. En-Nesyri is phenomenal up front, really, really coming into his own. Rafa Mir is going to be a huge little project for him to develop. They've got Montiel, I think, at right back to help them. And they've got, obviously, Marcus Acuna left back. They've got Argentine's left back. They're a phenomenal team. And Delaney's the big one for me. Right? I'll tell you why Delaney's the big one for me. Because Lopetegui has always, he's obviously he's this amazing attacking coach, likes attacking football, but he's always had a very, very defensive midfielder at the base of his midfield. He's the one that made Casemiro a thing. Casemiro was a Real Madrid B player, was going nowhere. He took him on loan to Porto and made him into a top-class player that Real Madrid then took back. Right, and then recently with Sevilla, he's had Fernando, who is like 30 million years old, but still playing in the base of midfield because Lopetegui loves to have a pure defender in there, right? Delaney is a pure defender. I think he's going to be a phenomenal sign because he's now going to enable them to stop playing Fernando every single game, maybe rest him, maybe rotate him, maybe even drop him altogether and move on and get Delaney in there and still keep that same bite, that stem, that same structure, that same shape that he likes to have him in his midfield. I think that's the Sevilla are a really, really interesting team. I think they're finally going to, they might actually do something in the Champions League this year. They need a favourable draw. They're not going to beat any of the heavyweights. Don't get me wrong, but they might do something quite interesting this year. And fans back in the Ramon Sanchez Pizjuan on European nights. Look, I'm telling you right now, that's the best stadium in Europe if you want to go for fan atmosphere. That's going to be huge, man. Those fans. I mean, what they did last season without the fans was impressive. Because those fans are like literally 12 man. They're the most, apart from maybe Dortmund, they are the most impressive home support in the entire continent. They're incredible.
Just flicking across to Lille for a second, Stefan. Obviously tore up the Ligue 1 title race last season and clinched it. But in a similar situation, as we've seen at Juventus and Inter Milan and one or two others, they've had a managerial change. And Christophe Galtier, who led them to the title, is now gone, which is a big, big blow. He was so central to everything that they did. And they had, by title-winning standards, they had a relatively thin squad. He stuck to the same kind of core of around 15 players for the entirety of last season. But now they're in the Champions League. This is a relatively favourable draw. It could have gone really bad for them. They could have got a real heavyweight to come up against a Real Madrid or a Man City or somebody like that. They haven't. They've now got an opportunity to maybe kick on and get into the knockout stages. Salzburg and Wolfsburg, either side of them in this one. Despite Galtier moving on, have they got an opportunity to push on into the knockout stages?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think Gautier moving on was probably a kind of prelude to what was coming down the line. There has been something of an exodus from the players moving on, key players moving on in particular. Obviously, we've seen quite a lot of them move to the Premier League. There was kind of glimmer of hope in that kind of, the pre-season cup final against PSG, which they won. You thought, well, maybe there's kind of life in the old dog yet, but the kind of start to Ligue 1 has suggested that it's going to be a really difficult season for Lille. I know I understand what people say when they say, this is a kind of Europa League group and it doesn't have any big hitters, but Lille will be up against 3 really decent teams, I think. Mo's made a really good case for Sevilla there. I think Wolfsburg are actually a real surprise package as well. A lot of people just kind of move on to them very briefly, but a lot of people expecting them to kind of fall apart after Glasner left and Van Bommel came in, who had no real pedigree as a coach, but they've held on to all their key players, and they've actually made some decent signings as well in the summer. So they've actually really bulked up as a squad, and they've actually had a decent start to the season. They have been disqualified from the Jerry Cup because they used an illegal substitute, but they've won their first 2 league games, so they actually look quite decent. And in Salzburg are just kind of, even though they're kind of technically a new outfit in their current iteration as a Red Bull side, but they're just kind of these kind of Europa League veterans, and they're quite happy to give teams bloody noses. They're quite happy to claw up points in the group stage groups. So I really fear for Lille, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. I mean, I understand that on paper they could have an opportunity here of grabbing a top 2 spot, but I think they're up against 3 really good teams here.
Yeah, I agree. Right, for the final time, the 8th group of the day, we're going to get you to call this one. Mo, we'll let you go first this time. This is a tricky one to call in terms of the level of the teams. There's all a bit of a muchness, but Lille, Sevilla, Salzburg and Wolfsburg, who is going through?
I'm going to say Sevilla are going to win the group. And I'm going to go with Stefan's recommendation. I'm going to go say Wolfsburg are going to finish second, because I have a feeling Lille are going to struggle to carry both league and Champions League at the same time, and they're just going to not do well in either. I think Wolfsburg finish second.
Stefan, are you going to carry the Bundesliga flag, Wolfsburg to go through with Sevilla, or do you see Lille or Salzburg springing a bit of a shock?
No, I think I agree with Mo. I think Wolfsburg really should do quite well in this group. They should be able to beat Wolfsburg. Should be able to beat Salzburg and Lille on their day. So I think Sevilla probably a bit too much for them at this point in this squad's development, but they've got good players and they should finish in the top 2. So I'll pip them alongside Sevilla.
Okay, great stuff. Very, very brave selections right the way across the board. We're going to call it there for the Squawka Talker podcast this week. Stefan, Mo, thanks so much for your time.
Pleasure.
Great, thanks for having me on.
Great stuff. Thanks very much, guys. And as ever, we will be here every week on the Squawka Talker podcast. If you hit subscribe, you can get access to a brand new episode as soon as it is ready. And obviously, give us a follow on social media, give us a like, give us a retweet, and also feel free to give us a review on the podcast. We love reading them. So if you want to get in touch, please do. And we'll speak to you again very, very soon.